And there was place for everyone in that section. This was miraculous, that everyone saw Hashem's presence in the Beis Hamikdosh by the fact that it says in Pirkei Avos, and in Tzfufim, they would stand in the men's section. Tzfufim, they would be compressed. When it came time to bow, there was place for everyone to be able to bow and prostrate themselves, stretch out, bow down to bow to Hashem. We say you have the same on Yom Kippur, where everyone goes on their knees and stretches out. This was in the Beis Hamikdosh, and everyone had room around them. They could have their private space. So this is then this. You have here the altar for the sacrifice. This is the outer altar, and then you have the sanctuary itself, which is Kodesh and Kodesh HaKadoshim, holy and holy of holies. In holy, you had three of the vessels. You had the shulchan, the showbread that was on the northern side. The menorah was on the southern side, and in the center was the Mizbeach HaKtoros, the altar on which the incense was brought. All of these details we will have in the Rambam. The Rambam will enumerate everything. And then in the inner courtyard, so in the first Beis Hamikdosh, you actually had the ark and the luchos. Ark with the 10 Commandments, both the original that were broken, and also the ones that Moshe Rabbeinu had carved out where Hashem inscribed. They were both in Kodesh HaKadoshim, including also was from last week's Parsha. You had the staff of Aaron with the blossoms. You're familiar with last week's Parsha. So that was also in Kodesh HaKadoshim. Now, in the second Beis Hamikdosh, that room was not have the ark that was hidden away before the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdosh, but only a Kohen Gadol could go in there on Yom Kippur. So now let's go to the actual text. Kedusha, the first chapter. Mitzvah Saseh, there is a positive mitzvah, Lasses Bais La Hashem, to make a house for Hashem. It should be a place that is prepared to bring the sacrifice, and to be able to celebrate 3 times a year, where it's an obligation that everyone had to go to the Beis Hamikdosh for Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. Shenema, where is the positive commandment? Also, the Mikdash, you should make for me a sanctuary. So where was the first sanctuary? So we have Kvan Nisparish B'Torah. The Torah is described. Mishkan Shasa Moshe Rabbeinu, the Mishkan that Moshe Rabbeinu made, was temporary because it was a traveling Beis Hamikdosh. You did not come yet to the resting place that is going to be the permanent place, which eventually was in Yerushalayim. So where was the first sanctuary after Matan Torah? After the Torah was given, where was the first sanctuary? Mishkan. Before that. Before that, Hashem said, go to your homes. So in each home, after Matan Torah, each home was a Beis Hamikdosh, which means Hashem's presence was felt in each home. Came into a Beis Hamikdosh. And the Rebbe once described this as, in a spiritual sense. He spoke at a women's conference, and he said that your home is a Beis Hamikdosh. Your children are little kohanim. They're the ones who are serving Hashem. Everyone is of Amlechas Kohanim V'Goy Kodesh. Everyone before Matan Torah were told they're going to be a kingdom of Kohanim and a holy people. That actually took place by Matan Torah. So each home was a Beis Hamikdosh. The family member, the head of the household was the Kohen. Children were Kohanim. The woman who was in the tent, she was taking care of the Beis Hamikdosh, the Kohanim. And just imagine if any of us was given an opportunity to go into the Beis Hamikdosh, into the inner sanctuary, and to tidy up there. Would that be a burden? Or would that be a privilege? If someone was given an opportunity to go into the Beis Hamikdosh or to clean up the Beis Hamikdosh, would that be something that they would say, oh, it's hard work, I don't want to do this? I mean, what would be the attitude to such a...
I mean, if you're talking about the house, no one wants to clean
Not the house, no, we're speaking about Hamikdash. Okay, but if your house is a Beis Hamikdash, so then it's a different perspective. So that's what happened actually with Matan Torah, and that's what every home was. Now, what happened? So now we have the Chet HaEgel, the golden calf, that the Shekhinah then ascended, no longer was in each home. Where did the Shekhinah, where was it transported? To Moshe Rabbeinu's tent. As it says in Chumash, when they wanted to find out something from Hashem, they would go to Moshe's tent. Moshe's tent was the next step where the Shekhinah rested. Then Hashem said that he wants to have that everyone should participate and make a holy dwelling place that's going to be a traveling Beis Hamikdash. That's where the Shekhinah is going to rest. From there, it's going to spread to the rest of Klal Yisrael. They no longer have it on a personal basis, but it's going to be a communal Mishkan, and this is going to be on behalf of all of Klal Yisrael. In order to do so, then everyone participated in the building of the Beis Hamikdash. Next page, the Rambam continues.
Does that mean that the reason that the Mishkan is created was directly because of the golden calf? Otherwise, if that hadn't happened, it would have stayed in the homes?
Until it, I don't know at what point, unless until they came to the Beis Hamikdash in Yerushalayim, where it would be built there, but they would not need a traveling Beis Hamikdash because everyone would have it as their. Now, the Rambam continues that there was the mitzvah continued. Next page. When they came into Eretz Yisrael, Mishkan beGilgal, Abbas Hashanah. So the Mishkan that Moshe Rabbeinu built was now in the city of Gilgal. And it was there for 14 years. It took 14 years to conquer Eretz Yisrael and to divide it among all the tribes. Misham, and from Gilgal, go to Shiloh. They came to the city of Shiloh. If anyone is in Eretz Yisrael, if you ever visited Shiloh, this is the Shiloh that the Rambam was speaking about. What was there? They built a house of stone. And the covering of the house of Hashem that was in Shiloh were the same curtains that covered the Mishkan. So you had 4 layers. You had the bottom layer of the different wool material, second layer of curtains that were made of the goat's hair. One that was on top of that was of the rams. The one on top of that was of the tachash, a special animal that Hashem had created that had a very colorful hide. That was the very covering, the most outer covering of the Mishkan. This was also in the sanctuary that was in Shiloh. There was no actual roof. It did have these 4 layers. How many years was this? Shin Samach Tesh Shana, 369 years. So it was there for an extended period of time. And Shemes Eli Charav, when Eli was the Kohen Gadol. His time, the time of Shmuel, when he passed away, the Mishkan Shiloi was no longer in operation. They came to the city of Noiv, Beis Hamikdosh, Shmuel, Chalab, the city of Noiv had a Beis Hamikdosh, when Shmuel died, that also became desolate. Givain, they came to Givain, and Beis Hamikdosh, there they built a sanctuary, and Givain, Beis Halamim. The last stop was in Yerushalayim, May Noiv Givain, Sheva B'chamish Mishana, was 57 years. So you have 14 years when they came into Eretz Yisrael in Gilgal, 369 years it was in Shiloh, and then the combination of Noiv and Givain was for 57 years. Each of these, they were fulfilling the mitzvah of Asal Mikdash, you should make for me a sanctuary. Now we see that the dwelling place of Hashem moved to different locations. When it was in the Midbar, it kept traveling there, then in Gilgal. Do we have the actual place where it was in Gilgal? Unless someone comes up with a sign and says, here was the Mikdash, we don't know where it was in Gilgal. Same thing in Shiloh. There are those who say that Mikdash was here in Shiloh, Nov and Givan, but when it came to the final resting place, this is Yerushalayim, it became forbidden to build a sanctuary for Hashem in any other place, to bring sacrifice any other place. The permanent places, the only places, and the Shekhinah never left, and that is in Yerushalayim, in the site of the Beis Hamikdosh, until the very day today. And therefore, we are restricted in certain areas on Har HaBayis and Temple Mount from going there today because we are not in a state of being sanctified. We're not in a state of being purified from contact with death. You have to have the ephod of the Paraduma from this week's Parsha, the ash of the red heifer, which we do not have. And from time to time, it is publicized that they have red heifer until the Beis Hamikdash is built and we need one. There is one available, and they raise it, and they take care of it, and there is one currently as well that is publicized that if it needed be, there is one where it could be gotten, and it's a red cow that is completely red without any other colored hair, whether it's black or any other color other than the red. Two hairs disqualify, two hairs of other colors disqualify this red heifer. Now, the Ein Sham Bayis L'Derei Deres, there's no other house for all generations, only in Yerushalayim Bilbad, only in Yerushalayim, and in Yerushalayim itself, Bahara Moriah Shaba, on the Mount Moriah, that is the Temple Mount, Shenema, Vayema David Zehu Beis Hashem Elokim, Zemizbeach La'Olah Yisrael. David HaMelech made a declaration, this that where the house of Hashem will be. Here will be the altar for the sacrifice, burnt offering for Yisrael. This is my resting place forever. So how did this come about? So Moshe Rabbeinu on Har Sinai receives blueprints for the Beis Hamikdosh. Physical Beis Hamikdosh corresponds to the spiritual Beis Hamikdosh. Every detail of the physical Beis Hamikdash corresponds to another level of energy that comes from the spiritual Beis Hamikdash coming down to this physical world, where the Beis Hamikdash was a conduit. Kedusha came down into the Beis Hamikdash. From it spread to the rest of the world. So each detail of the Beis Hamikdash was specified by Hashem. The only one who could make the vessel for the godly energy to come into it is Hashem, is the one who does it. So he's the one who made the blueprints, gave it to Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu gave it to Yeshua. Yeshua passed it down until it came to Eli. Eli passed it down to Shmuel. And Shmuel teaches it to David HaMelech. He gives him an actual physical blueprint. He gives him the roll blueprint. And David HaMelech has this blueprint, and he is the one who gives it to Shlomo HaMelech. And now Shlomo HaMelech had the blueprint, And he is the one who actually built the Beis Hamikdosh according to specifications that were in the blueprint that were given to him by David HaMelech, and also taught him all of the different kavanas to have, just like we have when Bezalel built the Mishkan. There were special intentions that he had to have while he was building each part of the Mishkan. So, and also to know what a person donated and how he donated. And according to his donation, that's where the donation went. So a person who merited that his donation of gold was used for the Aron, it was used for the Aron. Or did he merit to have it for the menorah, or the golden mizbeach, or the boards of the Mishkan, the boards of gold that were plated with gold, that were in Kodesh HaKadoshim and Holy of Holies, were permanently there. That's why we get on Shabbos, we have the writing, you have two letters. Why two letters? How was that in the Mishkan? Because when the boards were being placed in a certain order, when it was going to be taken apart, you had to know where it was originally placed in order that when you're going to rebuild the Mishkan, it should be put in the same order. So Aleph, next to each other, these two boards correspond to each other. And Beis, that's the board that goes after it. Gimel goes the next. So each one, because of how it was donated, and Bezalel was able to look at this material that was donated and know what was his intention, where does it belong? And this is how it was the same also with the blueprints that Shlomo HaMelech had to know the godly energy that's going to come down from each of these sections of the Beis Hamikdosh and in detail. It went to it went from to Yeshua, and Yeshua gave it to the next leader. Each leader had Yeshua and each leader until it came to what the Rambam brings down Eli and brings down Shmuel, and then David, and then Shlomo. Now, the Medrash tells us that we have the last sentence where when did David HaMelech declare this the house? This is where there's going to be the house of Hashem, and this is going to be the altar to bring the burnt sacrifice for Israel forever. When was this? When did this take place? So you have Jewish people who told 3 mitzvahs to the king. The king was to bring peace and tranquility to the Jewish people by making sure that the enemy who was surrounding them and trying to conquer Eretz Yisrael would no longer be a threat. But there was peace and tranquility. Then the next mitzvah was to build the Beis Hamikdosh. We had a king who brought peace and tranquility. There was no longer any threat of any enemy that is going to try to hinder or attack the Jewish people. The Jewish people were now very, very secure under David HaMelech's leadership. What was the next step? Beis Hamikdosh. David HaMelech asked for it, but no one was asking for it. So, as it turned out, David HaMelech took a census of how many Jewish people there are. They counted them. Instead of giving a half a shekel, they actually made a census, actually counting each person. And that itself brought danger to the Jewish people. Hashem asked David HaMelech, he had a choice of 3 things. Either there's going to be a hunger, there's nothing is going to grow, or it will be conquered by an enemy, or a plague. Which of the 3 do you choose? David says, if I choose hunger, people will say, he chose that because he's not going to go hungry. The king has a storage, he's going to make sure that he's going to be able to eat. If I choose to be conquered by the enemy, people will say that David, he has his fortifications, he will be secure. But if there's a plague, then no one is secure. That could happen to anyone who's going to die, whether he's in a fortress or has a plenty of storage. He's still susceptible, the same as everyone else. And he chose the plague. David HaMelech at that time was on Har HaBayis, on the Temple Mount on Har HaMiriam. And he sees an angel with the sword, spiritually, that is ready to strike and fulfill that punishment. And the angel tells them, if you build an altar, bring a sacrifice, then it will be suspended. And he's going to wait for him to do so. So David HaMelech purchases Har HaBayis, also builds an altar on the site that the Malach designates and tells him this is the site, this is the place where it should be built. Exact place. We're going to learn later in the Rambam what was special about this site where the altar was built. It was already used in previous generations as well. The Rambam is going to elaborate. So he builds the altar, brings the sacrifice, and the plague is expected. So David HaMelech then makes the declaration that Zehu Beis Hashem Elokim, this is the place where the house of Hashem will be built. This is the permanent altar for the burnt sacrifice, which was the daily sacrifice for Israel. This is going to be my resting place forever. Now, we say, so at that point, David HaMelech, the Jewish people sort of got the message that why did they not ask for a Beis Hamikdosh? Why did they not ask for a permanent place where Hashem's presence could be felt? And they did ask for a Beis Hamikdosh at that point. After this incident, they asked for a Beis Hamikdosh. And David HaMelech makes a declaration that they are now accepting donations for the Beis Hamikdosh. And in Divrei Hayamim and Melachim, there's details of how much the people actually donated and what type of quality they gave, and so much of it was prepared. And David HaMelech saw that everyone gave it with such gladness of heart. David HaMelech made a special call to Jewish people together, and he made a special blessing to Hashem. Is anyone familiar in a part of davening, which blessing does David HaMelech bless the Jewish people when they all give the donation for the Beis Hamikdosh? Is anyone familiar? Where in davening do we have the bracha of David HaMelech? It's in Shachris. Not in Shemona Esrei, in the Sukkah de Zimra, in the preliminary davening before Yishtabach. Anyone? Mayavorech, David.
Oh.
Say, keep going, go further. Mayavorech, Davas Hashem.
We stand, right?
Yes, we do. Yes, but what was that?
Yes, I know.
Do we have a siddur? Hashem והגבורה והתפארת והנצח והעד כחיל בשמיים ובארץ. So this was said when the donations came in. David HaMelech gathers all the Jewish people together and gives a shevach, he gives a thankfulness to Hashem, and he thanks Hashem. Baruch atah Hashem, Elokei Yisrael Avinu, God of our Father, Israel, Olam ad olam, forever. B'cha Hashem Hagdula, for you is your greatness, that's the creation of the world. V'Hagvura, and Yetzias Mitzrayim, taking us out of Egypt, that was the strength. V'Tiferes, and the beauty, what's beautiful, the building of the Beis Hamikdosh. V'Netzach, and the victory. V'Tiferes is going into, V'Tiferes is going into Eretz Yisrael. V'Netzach is the victory. V'Hoid, the beauty, which is the Beis Hamikdosh. So this is it says all riches is glory is yours, and We thank you, and you are greater than any blessing that we could give. So this was said when the people donated that for the Beis Hamikdosh, and so the Rambam continues. Binyan Shabana Shleima, building that Shleima Melech built, Kfach Mefarish b'Melachim, we have that description in Melachim. V'chein Binyan Ha'asid Libanis, and the building that will be built, the third Beis Hamikdash, Ava B'Shekasa B'Yecheskel, even though it's written in Yecheskel, Ein Mefarish b'Bayir, it is not very clear to understand all the details. So we have in Tanakh, we have two descriptions of a Beis Hamikdash. Beis Hamikdash that Shlomo Melech built, and the Beis Hamikdash as described by Yecheskel. Yecheskel lived after the destruction. He was during the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash, and he was also in Galus, Babel. And he was given a nevuah, he was given a prophecy to tell the Jewish people about the building of the next Beis Hamikdash. They were told that they're going to be in exile for how many years? How many years was the exile for the first Beis Hamikdash? 70 years. And Yecheskel was given this nevuah before the end of the 70 years. So he knew that this was not yet practical, that they should actually need the details of the Beis Hamikdash that's going to be built. So Hashem told him to tell the Jewish people right away, and they should learn all the details that he is giving over to Yecheskel. So Yecheskel, the Medrash says, asked Hashem, what is the purpose of this? It's not going to be built yet for a number of years. When it's going to be more practical, then I will tell him all the details. And Hashem says, but until that time, should my house be desolate? Which means, the Rebbe elaborates on this, that learning about the Beis Hamikdash, that itself, since that's the only thing we could do at this present time, that is our participation in the building of the Beis Hamikdash, learning about the Beis Hamikdash. So when we're learning now about the Beis Hamikdash, we are participating in the mitzvah. Also in the Mikdash, you should make for me a sanctuary. So right now, we are participating in this mitzvah. Now, so what happened now with the second Beis Hamikdash? What was it built like? First, or the one of Yecheskel. So he says, on Shabbos Sheni Banu B'mei Yit Ezra, when they built it in the days of Ezra, Banu Kabinyan Shleima, they built it primarily like Shleima Melech. And the things that are explicit in Yecheskel, that is incorporated in the second Beis Hamikdash. So the Jewish people had then a choice. When after the 70 years were over, what was supposed to happen as far as they were concerned? What were they supposed to do? They were told they're going to be in exile for 70 years. So when the 70 years were over, and there was no longer any restriction of anyone going to Eretz Yisrael, what should the Jewish people have done?
Go back.
Go back. What did they actually do? A minority went back. 42,000 plus went back. There were more than 1 million people there. So the people were well settled. They bought homes. This was already after the Nes of Purim, where the Jewish people were no longer terrified for their lives, because it says all the non-Jewish people gave them great honor and held them in a great esteem. Mordechai is the second to the king. So the conditions, the Persian Empire were wonderful. So people did not pick themselves up and leave because Hashem said the time of their exile is over. Instead, the king of Persia gave permission that whoever wants to go should go to Eretz Yisrael. He's going to give provisions. He's going to give also material for the building of the Beis Hamikdash. This was all provided by the king of Persia, the emperor of Persia. So they went with a galus mentality. They did not say that the redemption has come, we're now going out of galus. That didn't happen. Because of that, it was a Golus Beis Hamikdosh. Had they gone with the right attitude, that would have been the Geula Shlema, that would have been the final redemption. Beis Hamikdosh that would be built would be the one that Yechezkel spoke about. That is the one that Moshiach is going to reveal all the details. But had it been built then it would have been Moshiach who would tell them all the details. Whoever Moshiach would have been at that time, he would tell them all the details that are cryptic in Yechezkel's Nebuah. So whatever was clear, that's what they incorporated in the second Beis Hamikdash. Whatever was cryptic, that remained until the coming of Moshiach.
Is there any indication of who Mashiach would have been at that time?
Well, they had a leader called Zerubbabel. He was the leader. Now we go to the details, back again to the details of what is needed to have a Beis Hamikdash. So the Rambam tells us that from our perspective, what is the main thing about Beis Hamikdash? A place that we could serve Hashem. So the Rambam is going from the perspective from our obligation. What is our obligation? To serve Hashem in the Beis Hamikdash, to go there 3 times a year, to bring the sacrifice that are needed. The Ramban, he speaks about, what about Hashem's presence in this world? So the Ramban expresses the Beis Hamikdash is a place where Hashem's presence can be felt. And from there, it goes to the rest of the world. The Rambam speaks about our obligations, that our avodah, what is our service, what is the Beis Hamikdash for us? And then the Ramban speaks about what is the Beis Hamikdash for Hashem. It's a place where the Shekhinah could be revealed. And if those who've been learning the Chassidus, all the different worlds, Atzilus, Bri, Yitzir, Asiyam, so you actually had in Kodesh HaKadoshim, Atzilus was revealed. In Kodesh, Bria was revealed. And you had in the inner courtyard, you had Yitzira. In the outer courtyard, you had Asiyam. So the worlds that we're speaking about, when someone came to Beis Hamikdash, so he came into the outer courtyard, he was in Olam Asiyah HaRuchni, he was in the spiritual Olam Asiyah. He went into the inner courtyard, he was in Olam HaYetzirah. He went into the Heichal, where it was the Menorah and Shulchan and the Mizbeach HaZav. He was in Olam HaBriyah. That's the Malach, that is what we call Gan Eden HaElyon, the upper Gan Eden. Yetzirah is the lower Gan Eden. We have Kodesh HaKadoshim, which is Atzilus, higher than Gan Eden. All of this actually was revealed in the Beis Hamikdash. To some extent, it was also in the second Beis Hamikdash, because the 10 miracles that took place, we learned that it was in the second Beis Hamikdash as well.
This is also why in 770 there is the energy on the.
What?
This is also why 770 there is the energy on.
In the Tachten? Well, that was not only for 770 generally, starting back with the Alter Rebbe. So they called the room in which the Alter Rebbe had his room, where he took people with Yechidus, they called that Gan Eden HaElyon. Was anyone able to say they accepted that the Alter Rebbe was on that level, that Gan Eden is not a place where you have to go physically, it's a state of being. So you could be, it's a revelation of Olam HaYetzirah, of Olam HaBriyah. If one has that revelation, then they are in Gan Eden. And the place where the Hasidim would wait to go into the Yechidus room was called Gan Eden HaTacht. We have the same, it was called the same by the Rebbe as well. And when you were in Gan Eden HaTacht and you were ready to go into the Rebbe, or you felt like you were in the Beis Hamikdash. I mean, the experience was a very, very intense, highly, how should I describe it? People were saying to Tehillim, it was a very, very intense moment going into the Rebbe's room. It's like going into Kodesh HaKadosh. I mean, that's what I felt. If I were a Kohen Gadol going into Kodesh HaKadosh, how would I feel? It felt exactly that way. And the Rebbe was not imposing in any way. The Rebbe was not threatening in any way. The Rebbe was not he greeted everyone with a very, very welcoming, but still that all was there. Just being in the Rebbe's presence itself made you feel that you were in Kedusha. It says that everyone has around him whatever he's into. So the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya that you have everyone around you. Either you can have Gan Eden around you, or you can have Gehenna around you. So the bigger the Gan Eden is, and you're in that presence, then you feel it. Guess you have to be sensitive to that as well. Okay. Just interesting when my experience was when someone would come into the Rebbe's room, the Rebbe would himself up. The Rebbe would give honor to the person who's entering. My experience was so from the age of 14, 15, 16. I mean, I was just a kid. We had the opportunity to go into the Rebbe for our birthday. And the Rebbe was, he treated the students as one of the most important people in the world. So even though he was a 14-year-old, he was a student in what grade is a 14-year-old in? And the Rebbe treated him as a student of Lubavitch, and therefore he deserves a special honor. I didn't ask others what was their experience, but I could just share my experience. And now, this is the main part of the Beis Hamikdosh. You make the outer room, which is called Kodesh, holy. In holy, you had the shulchan, the table with the showbread, the menorah, and the mizbeach hazav, the golden altar. That is Kodesh. And then then Kodesh Hakadoshim, holy of holies. That was the inner room. The Rambam is going to tell us all the dimensions that each one had. And in that first Beis Hamikdosh, there was the Aron. Second Beis Hamikdosh, there was the Even Shesiyam. There was a stone in which the first Beis Hamikdosh, the Aron was placed there, but the second Beis Hamikdosh, you just had that stone. And that's where the Kohen Gadol would put the incense, the ketores, when you go into Kodesh HaKadoshim. And the Alter Rebbe in Tanya tells us the different level of Kedusha that was in the times of the first Beis Hamikdosh and the times when it was in the second Beis Hamikdosh. It was diminished because the first Beis Hamikdosh had the luchos. Luchos were infinity. So anyone who went into the Kodesh HaKadoshim was higher than time and space. Second Beis Hamikdash wasn't at that level. But still, you had to be a holy man, because if you were not worthy of, you did not live to walk out. So in the second Beis Hamikdash, so in the first Beis Hamikdash, you had only 18 Kohanim, Gedolim. So for 410 years, you had 18 people who every year walked into the Kodesh HaKadoshim and walked out and brought the blessings for all of Klal Yisrael.
Who chose them?
This was, we have Aaron HaKohen, and then the ones among the Kohanim themselves, they would choose the most suitable to be a Kohen Gadol. That was in the first Beis Hamikdash. In the second Beis Hamikdash, it was the times when the Jewish people were independent, and then there was a time when they were under the other governments. So you had when Shimon Kohen Gadol, the Anshe Knesset Agdola, one of the last of the men of the Great Assembly, we have him in Pirkei Avos. So he was a Kohen Gadol for 40 years. Shimon HaTzadik. Shimon, he's the one who we have in last of the men of the Great Assembly. So men of the Great Assembly are the ones who built the second Beis Hamikdash. You had the Nevi'im that were there, Chagi, Zechariah, Malachi, you had Daniel, you had Mordechai, you had Ezra, you had Nehemiah, Zerubbabel, you had all these people who were men of the Great Assembly, which 120 members were men of the Great Assembly. And they still had the Nevi'im among them who knew what was happening in the upper world. And therefore, they're the ones who gave us our davening, Shmona Esrei, comes from the Anshe Knesset Agdola, the brachas that we say is Ashik Nes Sakdailam, because they knew the formula of what to say, which word to press the right buttons. So if you want to get down the levels of Kedusha, what do you have to, what is the instrument? What words? Every letter, if you've learned Tanya Shara Yichud B'Emunah, every letter describes a certain level of energy. The combination of different letters bring down a certain energy. Because these specific letters are the ones that they could happen. Therefore, when they made Shemona Esrei, they made our brachas, each letter is specific. This is the word, this is the one, this is what we're trying to bring down. It's only these words and not other words. And they made the Shemona Esrei, the davening, and 12 gateways where each Shevet had his nusach. Generally, it was all the same with variances according to each Shevet what they need. So the Shevet of Yisachar that are the scholars, they needed a special help in their understanding of Torah. Zvulun, who were the merchants, they needed a special help when they're going to be being the ambassadors and meeting with people all over the world in their ships and their merchandise and their commerce. So they needed specific words that are going to bring them their blessing. So therefore, you do have different nuschos, different variations where it's all the same but with variations. And then there's the Shara Kailo, there's the 13th one, which no matter which person, which Shevet you belong to, it has in it the ingredients for everything. So the Alter Rebbe, when he wrote his Nusach, Tefillah, so he took from the Shara Kailo, the 13th one, that is relevant for everyone, no matter which Shevet you come from, whether you're a Kohen, a Levi, or Yisrael, or no matter you're Reuben, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, no matter which Shevet you're from, your needs will be met by saying the Nusach HaTfilah that the Alter Rebbe put in the Siddur Tehillas Hashem. So that comes from the 13th gateway. All other Nuschayos, Alter Rebbe chose from 60 different forms of nuances of the davening, and he put together what is something that is from the 13th gateway that is for everyone equal. Now, so even in the second Beis Hamikdosh, if you were not worthy, you did not survive that Yom Kippur. And it came to a point where people were buying from the government, which was either it was the Greeks or it was the Romans. They kept the clothes of the Kohen Gadol and they would sell it to the highest bidder. And the people who bought it knew their state of being. Are they worthy of going to Kodesh HaKadoshim or not? And if the answer was no, they still took that chance because they wanted to have that experience, a godly experience of going into Kodesh HaKadoshim, even though it meant that they may not survive. So they came to a point where the Kohen Gadol went in himself. No one could be in the vicinity. When the Kohen Gadol was in Kodesh HaKadoshim, no one could be inside the Heichal or anyone being out in close to the Beis Hamikdosh. So they put a chain on him, attached it around his waist. And if he survived, he walked out on his own. And if he took too long, he pulled on the chain and they had to pull him out.
Inside the Beis Hamikdosh?
It was a Kodesh, no one else could be there. Even the angels were not there. The Beis Hamikdosh, it was only the Kohen Gadol could go into Kodesh HaKadoshim. He was the only one who could go in at the time when it came time to go into Kodesh HaKadoshim.
Where did they stand with the other end of the chain?
Well, I guess in the outer courtyard. You couldn't be inside.
How do they know, like, if
I guess they asked the Kohen Gadol not to after he walked out of Kodesh HaKadoshim, he would give a tefillah. And they asked him that we should make it short because everyone is very nervous if he's just davening long or he has to be helped out. So it was a very trying because people were very they didn't know what was happening. So when the people were worthy on Yom Kippur, there was a red crimson wool that was hanging on the outside of the base of the Heichal of the Beis Hamikdosh. And when the Kohen Gadol would go into Kodesh HaKadoshim, and when the forgiveness took place, that red wool would turn white. So when the people were worthy, they actually knew the results of their Yom Kippur. There we have it. It is white. We were all forgiven, and there was a great, joy that took place. But some years it stayed red. You had to pray harder. So they put the wool inside instead of being on the outside. People shouldn't get too nervous about it all. But so now we have. So we have the two chambers, the outer chamber of the Beis Hamikdosh, which was Kodesh, the inner chamber, which is called Kodesh Kadoshim, and the Yil of Kodesh, Makam Achav Hu Nikra Ulam. Then there was an entranceway. So if you look at the model, you see that there is, in the front, is a little wider than the rest of the building. This was called the Ulam, this is called the entranceway. So after the entranceway is when the inner rooms were found. So you had an entranceway, then you had the outer room, and then the inner room. So it's 3 sections. The outer one is called the Ulam, the vestibule, the entranceway. The inner one is called the Kodesh, and the most inner one is called Kodesh HaKadoshim, Holy of Holies. Shloshim Nichne Hechel. This is called the sanctuary. All 3 together are called the sanctuary. That's the building. Then you make another partition, which is going to be the inner courtyard. It's not directly next to the walls. It gives us some space. Just as in the midbar, there were the curtains that made the courtyard. Whatever it's called, whatever it is, it's like the courtyard of the Oil Moed. It's called the Azara, the courtyard. And this is so called the sanctuary. So the inner courtyard was also sanctified as well. And Azara also means from the Lashon Ezra, that is where your help will come from. So the wall that we have of the Kaislam Arabi, where is this wall? Kaislam Arabi, the western wall.
Outside
Okay, so it's a retaining wall. The Kotel HaMarabi. So this is not the Kotel HaMarabi. This is the wall of the Azara. This is the wall of the courtyard. The mountain itself was 500 cubits by 500 cubits that was sanctified, the original. And the Kaislam Arabi is the western wall of the bottom of the Harabayis, the bottom of the Temple Mount had walls around it, and that was the western wall. And that was closest to the Beis Hamikdosh, because the Beis Hamikdosh was closer to the west. So the Beis Hamikdosh was going from east to west. Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies, was in the most western part of the Beis Hamikdosh. And you do have the tunnels that are under the Kaislam Arabi. Anyone gone to Eretz Yisrael, gone to the tunnels? So there's a place that's like an indentation. They have candles there. It's like a little enclave. Familiar with that? Okay, they say that is the place that is closest to Kodesh HaKadosh. It's like a little. So that's the. Okay. So we will stop here. Any questions? It's in. If you give me a Tanya, I'll find it. It's in Igeras HaKodesh. It's the last section. It's in the fourth section. Also, in the end of Tanya, I believe, in the first section, he also speaks about the difference of the two. In the chapters 50, 51, 52, yeah, so it's there as well. It's Tanya, I'm able to see.
What decide whether the Kohen Gadol was worthy or not?
Oh, was he a God-fearing person? Was he how committed was he to Hashem?
And then, so is it just about commitment to Hashem though, like in terms of?
You have to be the person who you would choose. The Kohen Gadol was representative of all Klal Yisrael, of all the Jewish people. The Kohen that you're speaking about, is he someone who you would say is the representative of all the Jewish people, and he's worthy of representing them on Yom Kippur? Who would you put in such a position?
So I would wonder because I think we learned at one point that the Kohanim at the time they couldn't marry someone divorced, but they could marry a widow. But the Kohen Gadol couldn't marry a widow because when he went into the Holy of Holies, they didn't want the chance that he would think badly of someone that could, pass away and he could marry the widow. So the Kohen Gadol wasn't allowed to marry a widow. So doesn't that mean that they're expecting the chance that even the Kohen Gadol would have that type of thought?
You see, there are differences between what comes up to a person as a part of being a human being. Does a person, the thought comes to him, will he dwell on it or not? The thoughts that come to anybody could be anything. Unless he was a tzaddik gomel, unless he was a complete tzaddik, that's a different story. But the thoughts that come, the question is he going to dwell on it? What happens if such a thought comes? Another thing that they were concerned about, the Kohen Gadol should not be in charge of making an extra month of Adar. They were concerned that he might not make the extra month in order that Yom Kippur should not be later in the fall. So if it's later in the fall, it's going to be cold. He's going to have to go to the mikveh 5 times on Yom Kippur, and he's going to freeze. So maybe in that case, he will not want to make an additional Adar because he doesn't want to freeze on Yom Kippur.
So it's like the acknowledgement.
I'm saying, it's just a human reaction that back in your mind, it's not, you don't think subconsciously, but we're speaking about the subconscious. Let's speak about the conscious. Consciously, the Kohen Gadol will not say, hey, because of me, though, everyone should come late for Pesach because I want to be late early for Yom Kippur, So this is just a human nature that comes into the subconscious. But yeah. But everyone wants to keep their copies, or do you want to put them together here so we can have them distributed the next week, or whatever you want to do it?
Like a donation $2.
This can be taught in different
Like,
levels.